joining us for another Facebook Live. We hope you're enjoying the holiday festivities in the company of loved ones. With all of the family gatherings and social events and outings comes the unfortunate and inevitable spreading of germs. Dr. Tiffany Kimbrough, Medical Director of our newborn nursery and pediatrician here at Shore, is here to give us some helpful tips on how we can manage the flu and other viruses in our own homes. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave them in the comments and we'll get them answered within the week. Dr. Kimbrough, thanks so much for being here. Before we talk about managing sickness, can you give us some tips on ways that maybe we can be proactive and avoid it in the first place?
Yeah. Sorry, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat about flu and other illnesses this season. One of the biggest things we can do, and the most evidence-based, aside from hand washing, is making sure that you're up to date with your annual influenza vaccine. So every year the CDC comes out with a new vaccine so that we can target the circulating virus for the season. The flu is a tricky virus. It tries to adapt every year and kind of trick our body into getting sick again. So making sure that you've had that vaccine is really important. Unfortunately, we are already in widespread rates in Virginia, and we've been so since last week. It's about 3 weeks ahead of last year. So we're seeing high rates already a little bit sooner in the season. And again, unfortunately, we've already seen 6 little ones who passed away from the flu. So getting that vaccine is really helpful. I said hand washing, can't say that enough. Hand washing is the most evidence-based way of staying healthy. So after touching anything, if you have a runny nose, go wash your hands. You cough, go wash your hands. Before a meal, it's important, and then after using the restroom. And then I think a really hard thing to do sometimes, even as parents, is to try to stay home when we're sick. The tendency is to want to take care of everybody else. You still got to run the errands, you still got to go do the things. But whenever we're sick and we go to the store, then we're exposing other people in our community to that same bug.
Good point. And life doesn't slow down, but sometimes we need to remember to do that. So what are the common symptoms of flu and how is it spread?
Really good question. So the flu is a little bit different than your typical cold, and it's a little bit more severe in the symptoms. So higher fevers, definitely muscle aches, headache, fatigue is a really big distinguisher between flu and your common cold symptoms. You really just feel run down, kind of don't want to get off the couch. Sore throat and cough are also common symptoms, and then children tend to have a little bit more stomach symptoms, abdominal pain, vomiting. We see that more commonly in little ones.
Okay.
The flu is spread in a couple different ways. It can be from us coughing, touching something, or rubbing our nose and touching something, but a lot of times it's just through the air. So that cough droplet travels, and it can travel for up to 6 feet. So it's got some distance to it, and that's one of the reasons why being out and about is a way that you can get sick from folks around you.
Okay. And you already mentioned a little bit the difference between colds and flu. Are there other illnesses that sometimes people confuse or think maybe they have the flu, but it's not?
I think as kids tend to have stomach symptoms, sometimes we hear a lot of stomach flu, and usually that's referring to a stomach bug or gastroenteritis, especially for adults. So influenza is very different than what we see as the common kind of bread and butter stomach bugs that circulate around this time of year.
Okay. So if I start to feel sick, or maybe my child starts to feel sick, what are the first steps we should take that you would recommend?
So staying rested and hydration, especially for kids, is really important. It's very easy for children to get dehydrated quickly. When they feel well, they can't rationalize they still need to drink, they just don't feel like it. So it's unusual for them to want to sit down and drink a whole glass of something or finish a bottle. So really encouraging small frequent sips, every 5 to 10 minutes. We're doing a little TV time with commercial breaks, trying to take something to drink. And then just trying to make sure that they're comfortable. They're not. We don't expect them to be their usual perky selves. Right. So if they want to spend a little more time on the sofa, then that's okay.
Okay. What about calling the doctor? When should we take that step?
And that's a good question, because we do know that unlike a lot of the common cold viruses, influenza carries a much higher complication rate. So all viruses can lead to pneumonias and things like that, where we could see something happen that is more extensive than your common symptoms. But flu does that to a higher rate. So things that are going to raise my red flags, or I'd want to hear from my parents, would be if you have any breathing concerns at all. One of the complications of influenza is pneumonia, so quick breathing or using extra muscles, and by that we mean that we're seeing the belly really heave, ribs sucking in, nostrils flaring. Those are all signs the body's struggling to get enough oxygen. So if the body's working hard, I want to know about that. Because dehydration is again a common complication. If your child's not making enough wet diapers or not peeing well, we'd want to hear about that. And then rarely we can see the virus cause trouble in the brain. So if a child's not making sense when they're talking or they're difficult to arouse, it's normal to be a little bit sleepy, but you go in the room when they're really not waking up like you expect, then those are all red flags. And mommy and daddy, instincts are really important. So if things just don't feel quite right, you want to check in with your provider.
Okay. So if we do come in and see the doctor, how do you diagnose the flu?
A lot of times it is clinically, meaning we don't have to do any tests. The flu has distinct symptoms versus other viruses, but if we're not sure for whatever reason, our kids are pre-verbal, we can use a little cotton tip swab that goes in the nose. We send off those boogers, and that can let us know which strain of the flu it is.
Okay. And how long can we expect flu to last?
It does last a little longer, so it is about 7 to 10 days of symptoms. And the fever tends to be around longer than your average cold. So usually we expect about 5 days of missed work or school during that time where you're most contagious.
Okay. And is there anything we can do to speed that recovery up? And then just managing the symptoms, what can we do to help alleviate symptoms?
So a lot of it is supportive, which means that we're using medicines like Tylenol or fever, and we always want to run medicines by your provider and make sure there's not a reason why you yourself shouldn't be taking those. But that's going to help with the muscle aches and going to help the headache and the fevers, pushing the fluids. There is a medication that's prescribed called Tamiflu. The Tamiflu lessens the duration of illness by only a few hours in healthy folks. So there's really specific instances where Tamiflu is prescribed, and your doctor will be able to talk you through that, but generally it's reserved for medically high-risk individuals in terms of seeing much of a benefit. For all this, it has a lot of side effects too.
Okay. Anything we can do to flu-proof our homes this time of year especially?
Yeah, so the good news is the flu virus is susceptible to all of your common household cleaning agents. So doing your semi-regular cleaning, you don't have to go crazy every day, but making sure surfaces are cleaned, especially if someone in the home is exhibiting any sick symptoms. Again, that frequent hand washing. We all want to see each other around the holidays, but this might be the year that you have to skip if you yourself are having any symptoms. So just try to use good judgment. If you're ill, maybe don't go visit your elderly grandparent or your family member with a newborn who, those are going to be higher risk folks if they catch flu or any virus from you.
Well, that was my next question, was who's at highest risk?
Yeah. So children under 5 have the highest complication rate from the flu, and any child with a medical complex illness. So that can come in different walks. That can be simple as asthma, but we know children who have asthma have a lot of complications if they catch the flu. Any adult with chronic illness as well, even just diabetes and hypertension. We know catching the flu causes higher stroke and heart attack rates for those individuals, and then individuals over 65.
Okay. This goes back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, that the droplets or the germs can travel quite a ways. How long do they live or last on surfaces like bed linens or counters?
So for hard surfaces, it is up to 48 hours. So it's a hardy organism, and that's one of the things that makes flu so tricky, is that it can travel far, it can last for a while, it adapts itself every year. So it tries to outsmart us, and we have to keep one step ahead of it.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this earlier too, but I think it's worth repeating. When is it safe to go back to school or work or public places?
Yeah, the general quote is 5 days. You want to be at least 24 hours fever-free, and the coughing starting to get less. That dry cough can last for a while, but it's that productive, chesty, wet cough that really spews the germs around, and so you want to try to have that be on the downside so that you're less contagious to those around you.
Okay. Anything else you would recommend to parents or just general community members to try to keep the flu away this season?
No, I don't think I can say enough either, the importance of vaccination. And I know that it's probably one of the more challenging vaccines that I have to talk about with my families, because there's a lot of misinformation around flu virus, around flu vaccines. So if you do have questions, talking to your healthcare provider, it really is the most evidence-based way we can prevent flu. And a lot of my families will say, well, you know, I've never come in contact with it. I've been healthy this long. Why is this the year that I need to do it?
Yeah.
And so I kind of liken it to, you know, most of us don't get into a car accident every day, but we're still putting our seatbelt on. So it's the layer of protection that we have. Hopefully this isn't the year that you come in contact with the virus, but just keeping yourself and your family healthy.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for joining us. Stay healthy, everybody.
Happy holidays.